And I just pressed the record button. So thank you ever so much for joining this evening. I'm Lindsey and I am a life and executive coach who specialises in working with amazing women who are secretly struggling with imposter syndrome. As I said, this evening's webinar is being recorded and I think you're all on mute at the moment. If you do have any questions as we're going through though, along the bottom toolbar there should be like a little speech bubble. If you click there, you should get a panel up here on the right. You can put anything in the chat there. I probably won't see it as we're going through, but at the end I will answer any questions that have come through at all. Okay, so I want to start today by sharing a secret with you, and that is I am not that comfortable doing these kind of things. As I was preparing for this, my self-talk included the amazingly encouraging words of, why would anyone want to listen to you? You have a funny accent and your voice is quiet. You are not experienced enough. You're not funny enough. You're not good enough. But why do we do it to ourselves? Why do we say things we would never ever say to anyone else? That is what we're going to be exploring in a lot more detail this evening. So I am an introvert by nature, which is obviously why I put a picture of myself on the screen at the moment. But I like to live a big life just in a quiet way. My parents have always called me their butterfly because I get bored really easily, so I flip from one thing to another. And I'm always looking for that next challenge. Talking to you lovely people this evening is my next challenge, my way of pushing outside of my comfort zone. In my corporate career, it meant looking for ways to constantly expand and grow my skill set, so looking for promotions and working in exciting projects. When I went for the roles, I could totally see what I was bringing to the party. However, once I'd achieved the promotion or the job role, that's when the self-doubt started to creep in. I started to question whether I could actually do the job that they'd employed me to do. And just by asking the question, that's when those feelings really started to emerge and grow within me. So with my confidence leaving the building, I started to wonder when, not if, but when my manager was going to realise that they'd made an awful mistake in hiring me. I then catastrophised the situation. My whole career was going to be in ruins. No one was ever going to employ me at this level again. You get the picture. I so wanted to prove myself and prove that the person hiring me had made the right decision. And at the time, the only strategy I had was to work harder, to put in more and more hours. And this could lead to several outcomes depending on where I was in my career. So sometimes I could feel really burnt out because I had no work-life balance. Other times I could feel really resentful. I'd be looking at my colleagues and wondering why they got to leave on time and I didn't. And then my absolute favourite pinnacle of my career, when I had the emotional meltdown in the middle of the office because that one unfortunate person said the one little thing that totally triggered me. The doubt in myself was crippling. I had sleepless nights and when I was worrying about the next day, and I spent my days wondering if today was going to be the day I was found out to be the failure or fraud. I already thought I was. It was overwhelming. It was exhausting, and I went through it every single time I took on a new role or promotion. Yet, it didn't stop me taking on new roles or promotions. It was actually when I made the career-changing move to become a coach, and as part of that, you do a lot of training around the personal development and self-analysis, that I realised that what I've just explained to you was a behavioural pattern. And when I researched it, it had a name. It's called the imposter syndrome. And the imposter syndrome are the feelings that you are a fraud, that you will get found out, that you are not good enough, that you are out of your depth, regardless of the evidence. And that evidence could be your qualifications, your training, your experience, compliments from your peers, even awards. All of that doesn't mean anything to you because you haven't internalized it. and because of that you feel like you're an imposter in where you are in your career at the moment. The term was first coined in 1978 by two psychologists, Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes. Their initial research was on high-achieving women, and what they found was that regardless of these amazing women's accomplishments, none of them actually felt that they owned their success. They cited the fact that it was some kind of luck on their part, and some even said they felt that they deceived people into making them believe they were better than they actually were. Although this initial research was focused on women, it is believed that men are just as likely to struggle with this phenomenon. In her brilliant book Presence, Amy Cuddy suggests that up to 70% of the population will struggle with these feelings at some point in their lives. So that's 7 out of 10 of us either have, will, or currently are struggling with feelings of being an imposter. To this point, Pauline Clance said if she had her time again, she wouldn't actually call it the imposter syndrome, she'd call it the imposter experience, because it is an experience that is shared by the majority of us. Feelings of being an imposter can be more prevalent though in individuals where you feel that maybe you're part of an underrepresented group. So for example, women at the moment in particular, maybe as they're going into board positions, if they are the only woman on the board, their gender is then called out as a characteristic, and that can be in a positive or a negative way. But just by calling it out, you're highlighting that difference, and for an individual that can then make them feel even more that they question whether they should be there because there's something different about them maybe compared to everyone else. If that example resonates with you though, I just also want to say you definitely do deserve to be in any position that you are in at the moment. Feelings of being an imposter are also fluid, meaning they ebb and flow over time. So there could be times in your life that you very much feel like an imposter. So for me, it was sort of the first 3 to 6 months when I'm in a new job and it's that learning curve. There could also be times that you then feel far more confident, and maybe once you feel that you've actually achieved a certain level of competency, those feelings maybe ebb away. You can also feel like an imposter in one area of your life, so for example your career, but feel totally confident and comfortable in another, for example your relationships. So why does it happen? I'm just going to hide this minute. So why does it happen at all? Okay. And there are many theories around this, but the one I want to focus in on this evening is the one that I think can be most useful in terms of empowering us to change our thinking. And that is, today, we potentially are thinking in a polarised way. We are thinking, they are good enough, I am not. And the they is everyone else, okay? Everyone but us. And the reason we do this is because we're acutely self-aware. We can easily recall all of the things that we've been through in our lives. We can recall all the mistakes that we've made, all the struggles that we've had, and we've made that part of our story. We've internalised it, and we think that's who we are. So whenever we then do anything that goes against that, so anything that pushes outside of our comfort zone, we don't think it's part of who we are. So we start to feel that maybe we're an imposter. We then do a comparison, and the comparison is with everyone else, okay? This also includes the airbrush celebrities, the the Facebook or Instagram life of everyone. Our manager that always looks so cool, calm and collected. But it isn't a fair comparison. We're taking that external view of what they are showing the world, and we're not considering that maybe they have struggles, that maybe they make mistakes, maybe they don't find everything easy, maybe they're faking it until they make it, but we don't consider any of that. We look at their situation and think they are fully deserving of their status and situation, and because of that, they can't be an imposter, because that is who they are. Both of these are your truth, but they're not a fair comparison. You're taking an external view of everyone else and an internal view of yourself. And you're saying that they're fully deserving, so by definition, not an imposter, and you're not because you're acutely aware of everything you've been through, so by definition, you must be. To further illustrate this point, last year I did some independent research on confidence, and I asked participants whose confidence they most aspired to have, and Michelle Obama topped that poll. You may also be aware that Mrs. Obama was quoted as saying towards the end of last year that she still sometimes struggles with feelings of being an imposter. Couple that with the statistic that 70% of us will struggle with these feelings, the them that we keep thinking about has to include a lot of people that are more like us than we're giving it credit for. So it's remembering that the image we see isn't necessarily the same as how someone is feeling. So what exactly is confidence? And another reason I think we sometimes struggle with confidence is how we think about it. So I think some of us maybe fear that we may be seen as arrogant or up ourselves if we come across as confident, because we think of confidence maybe as something that's very extroverted or very, as I said, in your face. Somebody like myself, if you're an introvert, you might find it really difficult to think, actually, is confidence something I actually want? But did you know what the opposite of confidence is? Okay, the opposite of confidence is timidity, pessimism, being afraid, shyness, being uncertain, being unsure. Is that really how you want to be viewed by other people? Okay, so reframing our thinking of how we see confidence and understanding that there is nothing wrong with being positive, courageous, certain, self-reliant and self-assured can help us break those self-talk and those negative thoughts around being confident, and helps us to really show up in a really true and authentic way to ourselves. To me, confidence is about being comfortable in your own skin. You don't necessarily have to be the loudest voice in the room, but it is about knowing what you're bringing to the party. Sometimes also I find that people maybe think, if you're confident, you're not something else, okay? And they go, actually, I want to be nice, or I want to be fun. But actually, you can be confident and also be empathetic, fun, goofy, serious, caring, loud, quiet, introverted, extroverted, or any other characteristic that is really important to you. Being confident is not mutually exclusive to any other trait. It's totally compatible. Okay, it's also about the fact that you can be very confident but also still be frightened or scared as you're going into something, because part of being confident is being courageous. Okay, and courage isn't about being fearless, it's about, as Susan Jeffers very brilliantly put it, it's feeling the fear and doing it anyway. So actually, that's the kind of confidence that I try and help people with. It's actually understanding yourself better, and then what you're bringing to the party. So now I want to just touch on a few things around increasing your self-awareness. So when you're struggling with those feelings of being an imposter, they can manifest and impact your life in several ways. But often these ways become very habitual. So they're things that you maybe think or do and that you no longer are aware of. So by increasing your self-awareness, by becoming aware of maybe some things that you do, you can then make a conscious choice of, do you still want to do these things, or do you want to change those behaviours to maybe something that's more resourceful for you? So the first thing is, do you undermine your achievements? And this can be self-talk, and it can also be what you say to other people. So a couple of examples. Maybe somebody said, you're thinking about your degree, and you think, well, it was from a lower ranked university, or it was an easier degree, so anyone could have got it. or you get a new job and somebody congratulates you and you go, oh, I must have been the only person who went for it. What you're doing is you're dismissing your achievements as achievements, but you're then further cementing those feelings of being an imposter because you're not internalizing those achievements and you're not adding any value to them. So another thing to be aware of, do you overwork? And obviously this is the one that I totally relate to. So the risk is burnout. And instead of accepting that you're already doing a great job, you just put in more hours to prove yourself. But then the risk is that you become exhausted. You then become aware that obviously you're not doing your best work because you're exhausted. So you then put in more hours to try and prove yourself. So it becomes a cycle, and it's one that we need to try and break. Okay, so are you a perfectionist? Do you want to be perfect? And this is about holding yourself to an impossibly high standard. And the risk then is every time you don't achieve that, you further increase those feelings of being an imposter, because if you weren't, you'd be able to achieve those stupidly high standards, right? But perfection is actually very subjective. My idea of perfect isn't going to be the same as yours, and we tend to hold ourselves to a much higher standard than anyone else would hold us to. I do believe in doing your best, but I also believe in being kind to yourself. If you achieve 50, 60, 70, 80% in an exam, would you be pleased? Sometimes good is good enough and done is better than perfect. And then the fourth behaviour is, do you have a huge fear of failure? I love the saying, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? But what if there's no failure at all, just feedback? Yes, I accept that some mistakes are bigger than others, but the majority can be learnt from or corrected. What we sometimes do though is our fear of failure stops us from showing up and letting our pure genius come through. Okay, so for example, you are so worried about what other people are thinking of you, you decide not to ask the question, or you decide not to share the idea in a meeting. But what if sharing that idea solved the issue? Okay, so there's some of the ideas to maybe become aware of, maybe things that, as I said, become quite habitual so far. And if they are things that you are noticing about yourself, you can then just, change those if you think that's appropriate. So now a few strategies to overcome imposter syndrome. So we've looked at what it is, why it may happen, and how it can impact your life. And this is actually where I've got some good news for you and I've got some bad news for you. The good news is I am going to share with you 4 really simple strategies that I know work from my own personal experience and from the work I do with my clients. The bad news is, though, that confidence is like a muscle. And what I mean by that is it needs constant exercise to stay strong. So if I use the analogy of training to run a marathon, you spend months training, you run 26.2 miles, you feel great. You then do nothing for 3 months. Would you expect to go back and just be able to run 26.2 miles? No, you would be starting in a different place, but there would be a certain amount of training required again. And confidence is exactly the same principle. You can build your confidence up, but because we're always facing into new situations and different circumstances, we need to keep our confidence high so that as we face into those new and different situations, we feel capable of, and our inner resilience is strong. So knowing that, here are the strategies that we can do on a consistent basis to keep those feelings at bay. So the first one is to reframe your feelings. So we've already talked around it in terms of how we think about confidence and what confidence is. But often we feel like an imposter when we're moving outside of our comfort zone. And the first reframe I want to talk about is the fact that when you feel like an imposter, is to actually say, I feel like an imposter, and that is a good thing because it means I'm learning and developing, because you're pushing outside of those comfort zones, you're trying something different. However, as adults, we tend to be really bad at that whole learning experience. We struggle with accepting where we are at the moment in the learning process. So, for example, you would expect a child just to know how to do anything. However, we do expect that of ourselves, and then when we can't, we kind of conclude that we are no good. And we might have the self-talk of, I can't do it, I'm no good at this. And this is where I find the use of the word yet can be really beneficial. So if you catch yourself saying, I can't do this, just go, I can't do this yet. And this reframe is really simple, but what you're doing is you're taking yourself from a fact, I can't do this, to a growth mindset. You're starting to open up to the possibilities of what could happen. So I can't do this yet. So the next strategy is to remember you're not alone. Okay, so we've already said about the statistic that 70% of people experience imposter syndrome. So it is an experience that is shared by the majority of us. People probably don't realise that you are struggling with these feelings because you are awesome at what you do. This is also the way that you have no idea the 7 out of 10 people that are also struggling with those feelings or have at some point in their lives. Okay, so I want to normalise these feelings. I want people to realise that this is actually part of often what happens when we grow and develop, and the fact that, as I said, you are awesome at what you are doing and you are not alone in how you're feeling. I mean, let's face it, if Michelle Obama can actually feel like an imposter, let's hope for all of us. The third strategy is to write down your past achievements and then internalise those. And this is absolutely everything that you've achieved in your life, okay? It's the big things and it's the small things. So I'm going to use the example of learning to drive. When you first get in a car, it seems impossible, okay? Your hands and feet are doing different things, there's a certain order of everything. But once you've been driving for a bit, it's almost impossible to explain to somebody how you drive. So how did something that seems so impossible become so automatic? Okay, and we have so many examples of things that we've mastered in our lives. Okay, so take it right the way back. Walking, talking, cooking, swimming, running, texting, using a computer, as well as all the other things in terms of your jobs, the mastery you've had in different skills into specific areas in your life and your career. Okay, so write everything down. And what this is then doing is giving you evidence that you can refer back to again and again, so that when you start to feel these feelings of being an imposter, you can go back to your own evidence and go, actually, this is part of a learning curve. And I have so much of my own evidence that I can ride this out. And yes, it's difficult at the moment. And yes, I'm facing into something different, but I've actually got a wealth of experience and inner resilience to cope with this, and I know eventually that I'm going to come through, and this is also going to be something I'm going to master. And the fourth strategy, and I make no apologies for this, I am a life coach, so I love a good plan. So your fourth strategy is to create a plan. So think about your ideal situation where you know you wouldn't feel like an imposter. Okay, this isn't just about Pollyanna thinking. This is actually, what do you need to do to get you from where you are now to that point where you will no longer feel like an imposter? Once you know what those steps are, you can make a plan. You can get the help you need. It might be that you need a mentor or coach. You might need to speak to your manager or your business partner. It might be that you need training or qualification. It might be that you need to work on your mindset and refer back to those past achievements that you've just written down. Okay? But whatever it is, once you know what it is and you've got it down on paper, you can make it very specific. You can make them smart You can make it time bound, and you can really chunk it down so you can see your progress that you need to make, not anyone else's, but just for you, to get you, as I said, from where you are now to where you need to be. And remember to celebrate all of those little successes along the way. So learning to accept myself, my perceived warts and all, has led to increased emotional freedom. It means I can show up as me with no apologies, no trying to fit a mold, no being worried I'm going to get found out. It's why I can do this today, even though I know it's not my most comfortable state, even though that I know that I've stuttered my way through some of this, knowing that I'm a work in progress, but being okay with that, because I know I've got a message I want to share, and that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to add that value to the people that are listening to this. I coach amazing women to feel genuinely confident in their unique abilities, to be able to use their energies in the most effective way for them, so that they can see themselves as others do, so they can show up fully after a good night's sleep and really excel in their careers and their businesses. And that's my wish for you too. I'm going to go to the questions, or see if there's any questions in a second. If, however, you do want additional free resources, you can sign up at www.lindseyhood.net/free guide. And there's about a week's worth of emails that'll be sent through to you that have lots of different resources to keep this journey and the consistency around overcoming imposter syndrome and building your confidence. So let me just see if there's anything in their chat. Okay, so there is a question around that's come through that's just around somebody's feeling really overwhelmed at the moment, to the point they're not even sure where to start. So I think what I would suggest for you at the moment is actually just close your eyes and breathe. Okay, just take a really deep, calming breath and just breathe in and out. Okay, so when that panic starts to set in, it's a really good way to ground yourself. Once you're feeling a bit calmer, get pen and paper, and what I would suggest is to write down everything that's in your mind at the moment. Okay, and I say don't censor yourself, don't put any judgment, don't think if something's good or bad or if you're right or wrong. Okay, there's no right or wrong in any of this, just let everything come out. Okay, so it's called a stream of consciousness. So it's all your thoughts, all of your feelings. Don't think about structure or grammar or spelling or anything else. You don't even have to read this afterwards. It's just getting everything out of your head onto paper. And what this is then doing is hopefully giving your mind a little bit more space. Okay, so once you think everything's emptied out, pause, give yourself a minute or two and see if anything else comes up. Okay, it's not to say those feelings aren't still going to be there, but what you're doing is you're committing something to paper, which actually has it actually makes a lot of things seem a lot less intense once you've done that. Once you've then actually freed up some of that space, I'd say maybe go back to some of those other exercises from this webinar, rewatch this, and just then think about reframing your thinking around, using the word yet. Then also think about what you need so you don't feel like an imposter anymore, and put in those steps in place. And yeah, I think just taking it really slowly, going back through that after you've it is really overwhelming when you feel that you are an imposter and you're not even sure where to start on that. So I'd say be kind to yourself, try and get everything out on paper to begin with, and then work through the steps that we've gone through in this, and then obviously sign up for the resources, because there might be some other activities in there that resonate with you and is really helpful. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. There are no other questions at the moment, and we're right on the past mark. So that was very very good timing. Thank you all so much for sharing your time with me this evening. As I said, you can sign up for the free guide. Equally, if you've got any questions on the back of this, please feel free to reach out to me. You can email me at lindsey@lindseyhood.net. Thank you all very much for your time tonight. Have a good evening. Bye for now.